Hello friends, hope you are doing fine, absolutely fine. Today's video I am just going to start with a new series, and this new series will include those videos that are related to medicine or pharmacology or biochemistry or physiology or even embryology. So all these topics that we study during the initial years of our learning the medicine, that is in our BDS curriculum, that is the dental curriculum or the medical curriculum or even any paramedical courses, we study these basic topic of anatomy, physiology, biochemistry. Let us revise these topic once again up to the basics or the concepts, so that we gain these concepts and apply these concepts in our clinical situations or in our day-to-day life or in our specialization where we are practicing. Those things can be applied based on our previous knowledge. If our concepts are clear, then it is easier for us to understand any new concept, any new device that we use, how that device acts on our system, our body. So let us so I am just making a new playlist where I would be covering the lectures on these topics. So I will intimate you about this in our YouTube channel. As you are all aware that this YouTube channel mainly focuses on the pediatric dental videos. So now a series would be starting covering the medical aspects that would be elaborated in a playlist. Okay, so today's topic is about special senses. This is a topic that is covered in physiology, and it is very important topic and very interesting topic, not only in the subject of physiology, but it is also important that these special senses is that we feel in our day-to-day life. And even now when we are visualizing this video, we are using these special senses. So I would be covering the basics of these senses, their mechanisms and all those things. So as you are all aware that I am Dr. Prabhav Chauhan. I am a pediatric dental specialist and I run a YouTube channel named as A to Z Kids Dental, where I focus mainly on the pediatric dental videos. So let us begin with our topic today of special senses. Now in this topic I am going to cover about the introduction, that is the basic of senses. What do we understand by these senses, the word sense? Then I would be covering 5 special senses, that is vision, hearing, taste, touch and smell. Now the why we are referring these senses as the special, because they are controlled by a specialized organs. And in medical or anatomy we refer anything that is special because it is being controlled by a special organ designated to them. Okay, so in this special senses, in a particular sense I would be covering 4 aspects. One would be the structure or the organ that is designated to these senses. The second would be their basic components, the anatomy of that organ. The third thing would be the mechanism of action of these organs, and the fourth thing would be the facts related to the sense of these special senses which we are learning about. So let us proceed with the introduction first. So this would be the 5 senses: the touch, the eye. So first I will be covering about the eye. This would be followed by the sense of hearing. This would be followed by the sense of taste. This would be followed by the sense of touch, and lastly I would cover up the sense of smell. So let us first understand what do we understand by the word sense. Sense basically means that it is any feeling that our body perceives through any external or any internal stimuli. Okay, so it is basically a feeling. For example, I can make you understand this. If suppose we enter into a room and we switch on the fan, now within a few fraction of seconds we start to feel something on our body. And what happens is that our body senses that thing and sends the signals to the brain via some types of receptors present on our skin, and the brain signals back that this thing that is touching your body, or this feeling, is basically the air that is touching your body. So the sense of touch is basically due to the air present in our body. So I hope you understand the word sense, that it means a feeling that is due to an external stimulus. In this case, the external stimulus was air, and the body perceives this air, sends the signals to the brain gets back and notifies you that this is air that is touching your body. Okay, got it? Now we also use some of the phrases related to sense, like common sense, which we mostly nowadays say that common sense is not so common, or the sense of humor, that individual has a good or a bad sense of humor, or we deliberate to a phrase or a thing about a totally nonsense thing or senseless thing. So what do we understand by these phrases? Basically, this by these phrases we mean that we are creating an image or perception about an individual or about an object, or about anything, that thing or that image or that phrase is we are perceiving this in terms of phrase, that this is related to that sense of humor. If the person is making us laugh, and that means he or she has influenced us or touched externally and made us laugh. And like this, all these sense means, or the phrases means, that they are just elaborating the perspective of ours to an individual or a thing or an object. Now, in today's topic, we will be dealing with the five special senses, as I told you. First, covering the vision. Second, I would be covering the hearing. The third, I would be covering the taste. Fourth, I would be covering the touch, and lastly I would be covering the smell, sense of smell. So let us begin with the first sense, that is the sense of vision. So this sense of vision is controlled by an organ called eye, which is referred to as the organ of vision. Now this organ of vision acts as an optical instrument which can be compared to a camera. So you can say that this organ can be compared to a camera which has a lens and image processor. I can show you this in a picture comparison. As you must have seen a camera, so the basic design of this camera is based on the principal working mechanism of an eye. So how different parts of camera are related to eye is that you can see there is an aperture or a shutter, aperture, a small opening. You can see in the when you see the open the cap of this camera, there is an aperture. This aperture is related to the pupil of the eye, from where the light enters and gets to the lens. Now the size of this aperture is controlled by a diaphragm in the camera or the shutter. In the similar way, it is the iris that is controlling the size of this pupil. Okay, then there is a lens. This lens is, what it is doing is, it is adjusting the focus of the image that we are perceiving, or the focusing the light that we are perceiving. And the lens is always there in the camera, and it is also there in the eye. Now there is a black point, that is the layer that is just covering the whole part of the camera externally. So in this case it is the choroid in case of eye. Now when the image gets processed, it falls into the retina, that is the image processing unit of the eye. In a similar way, there is a you can say a film that is just placed beneath the camera, or at the behind of the camera, that we refer to as a negative, which we develop to form a positive image. So a similar thing is there in the eye, which is located at or covering the internally the eyeball, where the light rays are focused from the lens and the image is perceived through a chemoreceptor mechanism, which I would be explaining in detail further. Now, the point to be noted over here is that the ideal size of the eye is 2.5 centimeter in diameter. This whole thing is 2.5 centimeter in diameter, the mature or ideal size of the eye. Now it is surrounded by three layers. We are going to know these layers one by one. First, we should understand the basic of how the image is being formed. The image is formed when the light from an object enters to the lens. The light enters through the lens through the pupil, and it what happens is this lens collects these light waves and focuses it on the retina. Retina is the internal layer which we are going to discuss. What this retina has is basically it has receptors on its surface. There are a lot of receptors on this surface. These receptors are referred to as the rods or the cones, which perceive the signals of light and convert these signals into an electrical impulses. Now these electrical impulses are sent to via optic nerve to the brain, and the brain processes this as an image or perceives our sensation of vision as an image, and we decide this as an image. So this whole process happens within a fraction of few seconds. So this is the basic of how eye works, how the mechanism or how the sense of vision works. So now coming to the three layers of eyeball that were about to mention. So there are three layers. One is the fibrous layer, one is the vascular layer, and one is the nervous or the pigmented layer. So let us get back to the fibrous layer and see it what it contains. It contains the sclera and it contains the cornea. So sclera is, as now coming to this figure over here, you can see that sclera is the outermost layer over here. It starts just upper part of the cornea. It is starting outerwards and covering entire eyeball and going up to the behind of along with the optic nerve on both the upper and the lower aspect of the eyeball. So it is completely surrounding the eyeball except in the anterior region. In this anterior region, the sclera is replaced by the cornea. So you must have heard of the cornea replacement surgery or the cornea infection surgery. Why it is mostly disrupted? Because it is exposed to the external environment directly, and due to its exposure there are issues related to it. So it is the thing that gets replaced, this cornea. Okay, now the next thing is the vascular supply. Vascular means it is richly supplied layer by blood. Now there are three things or three layers in this vascular category of eyeball. One is the choroid, one is the ciliary body, and the third is the iris. So as you can see in this figure, the iris is a thing that is like a diaphragm, and it is controlling the aperture on both upper and lower aspect. And after the iris there is a ciliary body. This one is a ciliary body, and this whole junction is a ciliary body. What this ciliary body is doing is it is holding the lens with the help of suspensory ligaments, so small thread like things you can see over here. This is holding the lens to have the lens have the ability to contract or shrink or expand so that it can focus the light rays onto the retina. And then is the choroid. This is the layer that is just beneath the sclera. This pink layer is the choroid. Okay, so these layers are richly supplied by blood. Okay, now coming to the third layer, that is the nervous or the pigmented layer. Now this layer that is just beneath the choroid, that is the third layer from outside to inside. This is the third layer, and just inside it is a pigmented layer referred to as retina. So it is a nervous layer. It is a layer that collects all these light waves, and it has the receptors which are referred to as the rods and cones. So there are a lot of receptors on this inner layer which are basically the processing unit and converting the light into an electrical impulses to be sent to the brain. Okay, so now let us discuss about the contents of the eyeball, what this eyeball is actually containing. We should know that eyeball is not a vacuum, it contains some refractory media for the eyes, for the proper focus and for the proper size or the ideal size of the image that is formed. It should not be like the image is small and our brain is processing the image as large. So it is because of these refractory media present in the eye, the image is formed in an ideal size. So in the anterior aspect of the eyeball, there is a layer that is referred, that there is a content that is referred to as the aqueous humor. So aqueous humor is present in the aqueous chamber that is just anterior to the lens in the anterior aspect of the eyeball. Now the middle thing or the middle media is the lens that is responsible for focusing the light, and the posterior aspect contains a vitreous humor and it is located in the vitreous chamber. So this vitreous humor along with vitreous chamber is referred to as the vitreous body. Okay, so these were the contents, different contents on the anterior, the middle and the posterior aspect of the eyeball: the aqueous humor, the lens and the vitreous humor. So light has to pass through these three media before the image is being processed. Now coming to the lens, this is an important organelle of the eyeball. What it does is, it first we should know that this is the transparent structure in the eye, and it can be compared to a magnifying glass. As you have seen that a magnifying glass is containing a lens, and what we do is, when we need to read something or when we need to focus on any object, we need to adjust that magnifying glass in a way that we need to get the magnified image on our desire, that how much magnification we need. Similar is the case that the lens adjusts its size to get a proper magnification of the object. So it is biconvex in shape, that is bulging from both the sides, as similar to a magnifying lens that is there, that is bulging from both the sides. Now where this lens is present, it is present between the iris and the vitreous body. Iris is the controlling center for the aperture of the eye, that is the pupil. So this iris is basically over here, this one, this is iris. So it is controlling the aperture over here, and the behind the iris is this whole thing, this complete whole thing, that is referred to as the vitreous body. The vitreous body is basically the vitreous humor along with the, this I told you that vitreous body over here, over here, that vitreous body is the vitreous humor along with the vitreous chamber. So this is at the posterior aspect of the eye, that is just covering over here. Now we should also know that there are two parts of the lens. One is the superficial part and one is the deep part. This is when we take a cross section of the lens. What we see in the superficial aspect is the cortex, and what we see in the deep part is the nucleus. Now what could be the function of lens? As we have discussed earlier, lens is what it is doing is that it is focusing the light rays that pass through it onto the retina. Okay, it is just passing those rays onto the retina. Now the power of the eye is measured in a unit called diopters. This is the unit for measuring the power of eye, and 15 diopter is the maximum magnification that a lens can achieve, and the maximum power that an eye can achieve is 58 to 60 diopters. Okay, so this was the functioning of the lens. Now let us revise the structure of the lens once again. There was a small aperture that was referred to as a pupil, and this aperture was controlled by an iris, and this iris was in continuation with the ciliary body. This ciliary body had some suspensory ligament or thread-like structure to control the lens or keep the lens in place and control its size for the proper magnification. Then the anterior aspect of this eyeball contained refractory media, which is referred to as the aqueous humor. Then there was the refractory media, the lens. Then in the posterior aspect of the eyeball, the refractory media was a vitreous humor. Now the covering of the eye, there were at the anterior aspect, this anterior aspect exposed to the external environment is cornea, and continuation of the cornea in the posterior aspect, and major two-third part of the eye was sclera. On the inner aspect of the sclera, there was a richly vascular supply of blood supplied layer, which is the choroid, and at the innermost layer was a pigmented or the nervous layer, which contained rods and cones. This is referred to as the retina, which was responsible for the collection of this light waves and converting them into image, which was rich in rods and cones, the image receptors on the retina. Now there is a small pit or depression on the back of this eyeball. This is referred to as fovea centralis. So this is richly supplied or contains lot of cones that are responsible for the image perception. Now the image that is formed goes to the optic nerve that is in alignment with the retina, and it follows the signals or the impulses received, electrical impulses that are received from the rods and cones. Now let's discuss about the second special sense. This second special sense is the sense of hearing. So what is it controlled by is the sense of hearing is the organ that is responsible for this hearing is ear. Now ear is not only responsible for hearing, but it is also responsible for maintaining the balance of our body. Now it is scientifically also referred to as the vestibulocochlear apparatus. It consists of three parts. One is the external ear, the middle ear, and the internal ear. So based on the location, the ear is divided into three parts for proper understanding and proper contents or the composition of this ear. So let us study each part one by one when we cover about the structure of the ear. The outermost part is referred to as the external ear, which consists of the auricle or the pinna. This outer part, this with the elevations and depressions or conversions, this is referred to as the auricle or pinna, and there is an external auditory meatus. So this part, small aperture like thing in continuation, is referred to as the external auditory meatus. Now it is funnel shaped, that means it helps to catch a sound wave more effectively. How it does catches the sound waves is because of a lot of conversions and lot of depressions over here, it increases the surface area. So whenever there are sound waves, they get accumulated into this small orifice, which is referred to as the auditory meatus, and it gets concentrated over here and transmits to this small narrow space leading to the middle ear. Now suppose I give you an example. Suppose you want to pour any liquid or anything into a narrow necked bottle or something like that, then you might have used in your life a small funnel type of thing. What this funnel does is, when you pour any liquid, any oil or anything, you pour it haphazardly into this funnel, and this funnel, what it does is, it just accumulates all this liquid and gets it into this narrow necked bottle and into in its content. So this is the role of the funnel, that concentrating all those liquid into one narrow thing. So similar is the functioning of the ear. It is it is just acquiring all the sound waves and concentrating those sound waves into the small opening and reflecting back into the middle ear. Now what is middle ear? It is a narrow ear space. This narrow ear space is the middle ear. What it contains is this space, what it contains is It is located in the petrous part of the temporal bone between the external and the internal ear. So this is the petrous part of the temporal bone over here, which is a part of the middle ear and internal ear. This starts with the tympanic membrane or the eardrum. There are 3 different small bones over here, and there is a smallest bone, that is stapes. So this is the complete middle ear, which contains the narrow tube, the eardrum, small bones which we are going to study, and the part of the bone that it contains, that is the mastoid antrum or the mastoid ear cells. Now it is biconcave in shape. What do we understand by biconcave? That there is depression on both the aspects. Over here there is a depression, and again on the inner aspect, when the middle ear is ending, again there is a depression. So it is biconcave in shape like this. On the both the sides there is a cavity like thing, so it is biconcave in shape. The third thing is that it communicates anteriorly with the nasopharynx through an auditory tube. So there is an auditory auscultation tube where it is in direct communication with the nasal cavity. So what happens is, sometimes you pour ear drops that are prescribed by a physician. So then those ear drops basically leach out from this space and enters the eustachian tube in continuation with the nasopharynx. So you feel that whatever ear drops you just got into your ear, that entered, some of that entered into your nose, so you feel something that has entered. So this is because the ear is in continuation with the nasopharynx. Posteriorly, the ear is containing the mastoid ear cells and the mastoid antrum. So at the back or the upper aspect posteriorly, the ear is containing the mastoid bone, that is referred to as the mastoid antrum, and there are some ear cells over here which are effectively cushioning this ear and giving this ear a cushion effect. Now what are the contents of the middle ear? The middle ear contains 3 bones, small bones, which are referred to as the ear ossicles. This can be referred to as the malleus, incus and stapes. So it can be remembered as MIS. So these are the small bones. This is the malleus, then there is an incus, this one is incus, and then there is the smallest bone that is referred to as the stapes. Okay. Now there are certain muscle that is holding this middle ear, that is the tensor tympani. This eardrum is connected to a tensor tympani, and there is stapedius muscle. This stapedius muscle is holding these small bones into its proper place with the help of ligaments of the ear ossicles. Okay. So what is the function of this middle ear bones or the ossicles? What happens is, there is increase in the pressure to the fluid of cochlea. How there is increase? Suppose there is a collection of the sound waves. These collected sound waves enter through the pinna into the external auditory meatus, and effectively all these concentrated sound waves, there are a lot of sound waves that are concentrated due to its arising from the external environment. Now suppose these sound waves hit the eardrums. So let us assume that the intensity with it hits the eardrum is 10x. Now there is vibration of this ear ossicles due to the intensity of sound waves hitting the eardrum. So these ossicles start to vibrate one by one and in a continuous chain. So this vibration leads to the vibration in the cochlea. So what happens is that there is a broad opening over here in the cochlea, and it gets to approximately very narrow tubes. So there is amplification of that intensity, and the amplification of intensity is such that it increases 10 times. So if a 10x intensity sound waves have hit your ear, then that gets amplified to a 100x intensity. So even a small whisper that you get or perceive is basically a very mild sound that our ear is amplifying it to give you that something something is being said or is whispered. Okay, now coming to the third part of the ear, that is referred to as the internal ear, inner ear, or the labyrinth. Now it lies in the petrous part of the temporal bone, that is, this part is referred to as the petrous part of the temporal bone. This complete segment is the internal ear. Now what this internal ear comprises of is that it lies in the temporal bone, which consists of the membranous labyrinth and the bony labyrinth. Now there are certain network of capillaries in the petrous part of the temporal bone, which consists of three parts, that is the cochlea. So these are the bony labyrinth structures. Then second thing is the vestibule. This is the vestibular space. And the third thing is the semicircular canals. These small canal type of thing, tube type of thing, you can say that these are the semicircular canal. One is this, second is this, and third is this. So these are the semicircular canals. Okay, and part of inner ear. So let us revise it once again. The structure of the ear, it contains the auricle, that is the externally exposed part. There is a rim outside this auricle, that is referred to as the helix. This whole external part is referred to as the pinna or the auricle. Then there is a small opening. This is the external auditory meatus. It is just connecting up to the middle ear, and where the middle ear starts is the tympanum or the eardrum. Now there is small bones that are directly connected to this eardrum. This is the first bone, that is referred to as the malleus. The second bone in continuation with this malleus is the incus, and the third bone that is in continuation of the smallest bone is the steps. So these are three direct bones that are there. Now there is a small opening over here, that is referred to as the fenestra ovalis, just beneath the steps bone. Then there is a eustachian tube that is connecting the ear and exposing it to the nasopharynx. Then there is a continuation of this into the middle ear, into the internal ear, that is referred to as the first thing is the cochlea, which is basically a part of a labyrinth, bony labyrinth. Then there is this continuation of here into the vestibule. This is the vestibule, and it is continuing with the three canal or tube like thing, that is referred to as the semicircular canal. So one is this, the second is this, and the third is this. 1, 2 and 3. So 3 semicircular canals are there. Now this is just connecting up to the vestibular nerve and the auditory nerve or the seventh cranial nerve. So both these nerves get together and transmits the intensity of the sound waves, converting into nerve impulses and going into the brain. So this was the basic structure with the mechanism of the. Now let us understand the mechanism of hearing. Now what happens is, once the sound waves enter collected by the external ear into the external auditory meatus, they strike into the tympanic membrane over here, and these vibrations are transmitted to the oval window, that is over here, this round window, and what happens is that whenever there is transmission, there is increase in the pressure waves to perilymph in the scala vestibula and scala tympani. So there is amplification of these sound waves in the cochlea that contains the scala vestibule and the scala tympani, and this increase in pressure of the sound waves causes oval window to bulge inward and round window to bulge outwards. So what happens is, there is stimulation or depolarization of hair cells. Now what are these hair cells? These are the receptors that are present in the ear, responsible for converting those sound waves, amplified sound waves, into electrical or nerve impulses, to send that nerve impulses to brain via an auditory nerve or the vestibular nerve. So we can say that these hair cells through the seventh cranial nerve, that is auditory nerve. Sound is perceived in the auditory cortex, the center for hearing in the brain. Okay, so this was the mechanism of hearing. So now coming up to the next sensation, that is the sensation of taste. So this sensation of taste is controlled by an organ called tongue. The sense of taste is also referred to by a term referred to as the gustation. Now this is a chemical sense that we can say the food that we take or any substance that we take into our oral cavity is because the sensation that we receive is because of the chemicals present in that food. Now there is a sensory modality which is mediated by this sensory modality of the chemical senses mediated by the chemoreceptors of the tongue. So there are some receptors present on the tongue that are responsible for recognizing these chemicals and getting a taste developed. So as we have already learned about the receptors, in the eye the receptors were rods and cones, in the ear the receptors were hair cells. Now in the tongue there are certain receptors that we are going to talk about, but first we should know about different types of taste. So our tongue identifies 4 types of taste: the bitter taste, the sour taste, the salty taste and the sweet taste. The bitter taste is caused by substances containing nitrogen or alkaloids. These are detected by the back of the tongue. So as you can see over there in this figure, the back of the tongue is recognizing the bitter taste, usually containing the substances that contain nitrogen or alkaloids. Example, we can say the caffeine, the nicotine or the quinine substances. Suppose we take coffee or tea, that means the taste of this coffee or the taste of this tea is recognized by the back surface of the tongue over here. Now coming to the now coming to the sour taste, due to the electrolytes in the food, that is active agent over there is hydrogen. Now when the active agent is hydrogen in a food substance, then that is detected by the posterior half of each side of the tongue. So this posterior half on the lateral aspect or the lateral 2/3 of the tongue or posterior 2/3 of the tongue on the lateral side is recognizing the sour taste. Now coming to the third taste, that is the salty taste. The salty taste is caused by the inorganic compounds like magnesium, calcium, zinc, and for example we can say the iodized salt. So this taste of saltness is detected by the anterior half of each side of the tongue. So anterior 2/3 of the tongue on the lateral aspect is identifying the salty taste. Now coming to the fourth taste that our tongue recognizes, that is primarily associated with organic compounds. Example, glucose, sugars, aldehydes and ketones. So organic compounds are responsible for the recognition of the sweet taste. So sweet taste is detected by the tip of the tongue. Whenever we take any sweet substance, any sweet, then that is recognized by the tip of the tongue. Now coming to the receptors of the tongue, the receptors of tongue are referred to as the taste buds, which are located on the surface of the tongue and categorized into 4 different categories. One is the circumvallate papillae, the foliate papillae, the filiform papillae and the fungiform papillae. And so let us see their location. The circumvallate papillae is these receptors that are present in the posterior aspect of the tongue, as you can see, in a circumferential way, so they are referred to as a circumvallate papillae. Then there is a foliate papillae. Foliate means that they resemble like a flower petal, so they are located at the lateral aspect on the posterior aspect of the tongue. Then there is a filiform papillae, some small dots like over here. So these dots resemble the filiform thing, so they are referred to as the filiform papillae. And the last are the fungiform, which these small circles you can see over here are the filiform papillae. So these receptors primarily are for the taste and account for approximately 10,000 in number. So These taste buds are around 10,000 in number on the surface of the tongue. Now, how this mechanism of taste sensation works, that is, first there is a taste stimulating substance. It is adsorbed on the surface of the taste cells. Taste cells are the taste buds. Now, these taste cells become permeable to sodium ions and the taste cells depolarize, that is, there is increased polarity. So, what happens is there is conduction of nerve impulse, and this nerve impulse is sent through the taste nerve fibers to the central nervous system. So, as you can see over here, whenever the food touches this surface, there is adsorption of that food surface on these taste buds, and what happens is these taste buds, what they do is they become permeable to the sodium present in these food substances, or they what they do is they become permeable to exchange the ions, chemical ions, with the sodium. So, what happens, there is depolarization of these nerves which are connected to the receptors, and there is generation of an electric impulse. This electrical impulse is sent to the brain for the sensation of taste, as to perceive which type of taste the food has or the substance that we had taken in our body. So, now coming to the next sense, that is the sensation of touch or the sense of touch. Now, this sense of touch is basically dealt with, or the organ responsible is hand, but it is found all over the body, as the skin also senses the taste. So, skin is also the organ responsible for the sensation of taste. Now, this sensation of taste allows us to sense hot stuff, cold stuff, texture of the stuff, whether the stuff or the thing that we are experiencing or touching is smooth or rough, then the pain sensations. So, all these type of sensations are come under the sensations of touch. Now, these are controlled by huge network of receptors. So, as we have already studied that there are receptors that control that identify these sensations and sends an electrical impulse or converts the sensation to an electrical impulses, and that electrical impulses are shared with the brain. So, in this case, the sensation of touch, it is controlled by a huge network of these receptors and nervous endings that are referred to as the somatosensory system. Now, before going into the details of these receptors, we should know about the layers of the skin. There are 3 layers of the skin. The outermost layer is referred to as the epidermis, which consists of dry skin or the dead cells. The middle layer, that is this layer, consists of hair follicle. This is the hair follicle that you can see over here, and the nerve endings. So, there are lot of nerve endings over here in this layer of dermis that is present in the middle aspect of the skin. Then there is a subcutaneous tissue, the fat layer. So, here is an adipose tissue, the fatty layer, that is at the innermost aspect of the skin. So, this was the 3 layers, the epidermis, dermis, and the subcutaneous tissue containing the fat. Now, 3 types of receptors are present for the sensation of touch. The first receptors are the mechanoreceptors. Now, as the word says mechano, they are dealing with the pressure sensations, the vibration, or even the texture, whether the surface is smooth or rough. So, these are located in the dermal area. So, this is the dermis area of the skin where these mechanoreceptors are located. Now, coming to the second category of receptors for the touch, these are referred to as the thermoreceptors. They sense the changes in temperature of objects that skin feels. The 2 basic category of thermoreceptors are hot and cold. So, these thermoreceptors, what they do is they identify whether the substance that we are touching or experiencing is either hot or cold, and these thermoreceptors are also located in the dermis area of the skin, that is the middle area of the skin. Now, coming to the third category of pain receptors, that is the nociceptors, also referred to as nociceptors. Now, they detect pain stimuli that can damage the skin or other tissues of the body. Now, what happens is whenever there is pain sensation, these nociceptors stimuli stimulate the signals and send it to brain, and it identifies as a pain, so that any damage to the that organ or the skin is protected. Now there are over 3 million pain receptors present throughout the body, that is the skin, the muscle, bone or the organs. So if there is any internal pain in organ, it is stimulated or it is perceived by the pain receptors present at that organ. Okay, now let us understand the mechanism of touch. So how this touch actually works. Suppose there is an external stimuli like pinching of the skin or pricking of the skin surface, or any hot substance, or any feather touch is there, or any other external stimuli is there. What happens is, these stimuli are perceived as either pressure sensation, temperature change, prick, smooth or texture, whether hard or smooth, so by their respective receptors that are present. So if there are thermoreceptors, then they will identify the changes in the temperature. If there is any pressure changes, then it can be identified by the mechanoreceptors. If there is any pain sensation, then it will be identified by the nociceptors. So when the receptors identify that sensation, then what happens, that stimuli, then what happens is, there is generation of impulse. What the role of these receptors is, converting that feeling or the sensation to an impulse, and this impulse leads to depolarization of the nerve. And when there is depolarization, that is conversion of that signal into electrical impulse, is called depolarization, which signals the CNS about the condition, about this external stimulus, and it is perceived as either pain or any prick or any temperature change or any texture that we feel. So this was the mechanism of touch. Now coming to the last sensation, that is the sensation or the last special sense, that is the sense of smell. So the organ responsible for this sense of smell is nose. It is basically the sensory modality which is mediated by the chemoreceptors. As we have studied that there are chemoreceptors responsible for, or the receptors are responsible for the mediation of the sense. So in the nose also there are some chemoreceptors that are present in the olfactory mucosa. There is a mucosa underlying the nasal cavity, and this olfactory mucosa is containing lot of chemoreceptors to identify the sense of smell. So primary sense of smell or the substance that we usually identify are the chemopharaceous, the ethereal, floral senses or the musky sense, then the peppermint, pungent or the putrid. So all these are the primary senses that we can easily identify. Now the point to be noted over here is that our sense of smell is 20,000 times greater than the sense of taste. So it is a good thing. Suppose there is rotting of any substance, any food item, then our sense of smell is so great that it can identify that substance has rotten or the food is not suitable to eat or unhygienic. In that case, we don't take that food inside our body. So this is a good and positive sign that our sense of smell is more developed than the sense of taste. Now coming to the receptors of smell, which are located in the olfactory mucosa or the olfactory epithelium, they are referred to as the olfactory receptors. So this is the olfactory epithelium, that is this layer underlying, which is containing lot of receptors. And what happens is, in the olfactory epithelium there are three types of receptor cells, are made up of three types of cells: the receptor cells, the subtentacular cells and the basal cells. So over here, any sense of smell is identified, or any odorant molecule is identified over in this oral epithelium, which is later on transferred to the respective areas and further communicating with the nerve. So how the smell producing, there are certain characteristics of these smell producing substances. These are that any substance that we need to smell should have these three characteristics. One is the volatile nature, that is that substance should be in the form of vapors or gas, so that it can easily enter into the nostrils, via nostrils into the nasal epithelium. So it should be in the form of a vapor or gas. Second thing is water soluble, that is to pass through the mucus of the olfactory cells. Now there are a lot of olfactory cells and the receptors present in this mucosa. So these vapors, when we can sniff these vapors, they should be water soluble. The substance in the odorant molecule should be water soluble, so that it passes the olfactory epithelium, and also it should be lipid soluble, that is there are different layers. So when the odorant molecule passes through these layers, it should also be water soluble and lipid soluble, because lipid bilayer of olfactory cells can be passed and stimulated. When there is stimulation of these layer, then the signal can be transmitted further. Now there are two important things that we should make a note of. One is referred to as the threshold of smell, that is that minimum quantity of an odorant present in air which can stimulate the sense of smell. For example, there should be a minimum quantity of any substance. It should be able to influence the sense of smell, so that minimum quantity is referred to as the threshold of smell. The second thing is olfactory adaptation. Now what do we mean by olfactory adaptation is that whenever, for an example, whenever we pour a deodorant or a perfume on our body, then at few instances at the starting or the beginning we feel a strong smell about that deo, but in few hours, 2 or 3 hours or more, our body or is not able to recognize the smell that we had worn, and is there any smell or not. But when you meet a person, external person, your colleagues, your friends, your family members, then they easily identify that you had put on the deodorant or the any substance you had bought, so or the perfume that you had worn. So this is because there is decrease in the olfactory sensation when there is continuous exposure to an odorant. So because you were in continuous exposure to that odorant, so there was decrease in this olfactory sensation. This happens. So this is referred to as the olfactory adaptation. And our nose can identify or distinguish up to 2000 to 4000 different odors. So we can say that the nose has the ability, if we keep 2000 to 4000 substances at one instant of time, then our nose can identify those or distinguish those 2000 to 4000 different odorant substances. Okay, so this was about the nose. Now let us study about the mechanism of the smell, how the smell mechanism works. Now there are two theories. One is the physical theory, which states that the physical shape of the odorant molecule leads to the sensation of smell. For example, the shape of odorant molecule, if it is round, then that means it has a lot of surface area to get absorbed easily on the surface of the receptors and get back into the nasal epithelium, and the olfactory receptors will identify it, and it can be later conducted into a nerve impulse. Now the second theory suggests that, or the chemical theory, which says that the odorant molecule chemically binds to the protein receptors in the membrane of the olfactory cilia. Now there are some protein receptors present in the olfactory cilia or the hair cells of the olfactory or the nasal epithelium. These are the receptors present over here. Now when certain chemical present in the odorant molecule enters this olfactory epithelium, it is identified by these protein receptors over there present in the epithelium, and there are olfactory cilia. So it lets in the, or it increases the permeability of that olfactory cilia in the membrane. So when the protein receptors bind to the odorant molecule, there is increased permeability of the olfactory cilia, and this olfactory cilia or the hairs in the olfactory epithelium, they increase the receptor potential. So they increase that the the information of the smell can be gained. So if one molecule adheres, then all the substance or all the chemicals are received, and their receptor potential is increased, or then that leads to a generation of an action potential, that is the exchange of sodium potassium ions is generated, and this leads to the generation of an electrical impulse or stimulation of the nerve fiber, which sends signal to the brain. So this was all about the presentation about the special senses. Hope you could understand all the things I simplified for you. Now if you have any queries or any questions, you can definitely write in the comment section below this video. I will definitely reply to your queries. And so thanks for watching this video. Please do stay at home and stay safe. Thank you. Have a nice day. Bye bye.